I am here at Awesome Con. Introduce yourself, ma'am.
Yes, so I am Dr. Erin Macdonald. I am an astrophysicist and I teach science of science fiction. So I
Okay.
am here to use science fiction to teach science.
So I was reading on your bio that you actually do kind of sort of consulting on films and stuff. So to what level are you actually doing the consulting for?
It really depends on what the writers or showrunners are looking for. And so sometimes it may just be kind of a phone call to say, hey, I'm coming up with this concept. Maybe it is for how we're going to travel from one planet to the other.
Okay.
As an astrophysicist, does that make you throw up in your mouth? And is there anything I need to, be aware of or be careful of? Or it could be sitting in writers' rooms and being involved with writers where either I'm there as a resource, they can turn to me and just say, hey, does that make sense? Or is there something we can use here? Sometimes it's just been at home editing scripts. So the scripts come to me and I go through, and it really depends on how much they want, right? If they want it to be totally scientifically accurate, or they just are like, we don't want to embarrass ourselves.
So play very fast and loose, so to speak.
Exactly.
Okay. So if you can say, which shows have you actually done it for?
Yeah, so the latest one that I can talk about is, they're usually like that, is Orbital Redux. So it was.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
awesome.
I've heard
Cool.
about it a little bit.
Yeah, so I helped them. That was really involved. That was really fun. So that was one where I helped edit the scripts. I worked with the showrunner for that. And then I was able to actually be on set, and they were coming up with equations, and they had to, one of the main characters has to quickly scramble an equation on the wall. And so she wanted to rehearse it, you know, and figure out exactly what she needed to say, mumble to herself as she's doing it, and make sure because it was, for those of you who don't know, it was a live sci-fi show. So it happened live.
So it's
Yeah, it was a scripted but live streamed show. So she was on the spot to make sure she got that equation right. Yeah.
So because that's always been fascinating to me because we had talked to Neil deGrasse, and he always has his theories on certain things with movies and such. So for you being consulting, has there ever been a time where there's been kind of disagreements on certain aspects of the science of it, or has it just been like, okay, well, she knows what she's talking about, so why are we even arguing on it or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things where I kind of stand out, because I think that is the case with a lot of scientists when they're brought into writers' rooms, it can be kind of a no, that's never going to work type thing. But I, as a sci-fi fan and sort of aware of how that writing process works, I'm like, all right, we're going to improvise this. We're going to yes and everything, So you give me something, and if that's what you want to do, okay, we'll just try to make it work, And I'll say, if they want me to critique it, if they say, hey, we really want to make sure we get this right, and I say, that's not great, and they want feedback, I think a lot of it too is that it's part of my job to not just say no, but say, well, here's an idea, right? Here's another way you could approach that. And so it's really a good working relationship and figuring out what they need.
Oh, okay. Now, as a woman and stuff in this field of being an astrophysicist, is it always kind of a good thing for you to kind of get more women involved in that field, so to speak? I should say, is it tough to try to get more women involved in that field? Because, it is kind of it's a lot to kind of take in, so to speak.
It is, and I think I really take this idea of, mentorship and representation really seriously, because when I was just interested in space, right?
Yeah.
And I was growing up in the 90s and was obsessed. I was a little redheaded girl watching a redheaded woman put on a lab coat and fight aliens. And so Dana Scully was every single thing I wanted to be, and that was really important to me. And so I think that, representation in science fiction as well as in real life is important. And when I go and speak to schools, they hear, Dr. Macdonald's coming to talk about astrophysics, and kids are like, oh, whatever, and then I walk in and I've got tattoos and, bright hair, and they're like, oh, wait, you see sort of the little emo kid in the back, they're like, oh, wait, that's kind of cool. And that's really neat. And so I think if there's any opportunity really for kids to see themselves in other people, that just puts that little spark in their brain to say, oh, maybe I could do that too, and that's really important.
So you jumping into doing that, obviously you said, a lot of stuff that you saw on TV inspired you to kind of do that, but past that, what kind of put you over the hump, I want to do this fully? 100%.
Yeah, when I went into kind of my career and deciding to study physics and astrophysics, it was just this idea that you could go and study space. That was amazing to me because I just thought it was so cool. And this idea that I would go to, college and just study space.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And so I really enjoyed that, but I never necessarily wanted to become a professor, you know.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I went through and I had really great opportunities. I had an opportunity to go to graduate school
Yeah.
in Scotland. And so I went to do my PhD there, and then I did one postdoc research after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was kind of like, you know, this isn't for me. Like, research is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And the hardest thing was about that was this fact that I felt that was my only opportunity to like mentor women and get women into science, and that if I was walking away from academia, I would no longer be a voice for that.
Yeah.
And that was a really, really hard decision. And so one of the important things is when I left, I tried to find any other opportunity I could to teach. And that's kind of what made me start doing these conventions a lot more, was that was an opportunity. Didn't have to be in the classroom, didn't have to be at a university, but where people could at least just see me, and maybe if some kid is like, oh, cool, like, I'm super into heavy metal music and tattoos, and
So you
I can be a
actually do
scientist
that
too, you know? And so I'm really lucky that I didn't lose that, you know, that I found other ways to keep inspiring and mentoring other people.
So now that you're here, I mean, I got to ask this, you know, this whole Star Trek, at least a good amount of the Star Trek Next Generation crew are here. So like for you, and I know you have an actual panel here with a couple of them, so like, I'm pretty sure you're pretty ecstatic doing that. So is it kind of like, I mean, you're in the space of like going to these conventions. Has it been kind of surreal to you? Has it like kicked in for you? Like, I can't believe I'm like talking with these people and doing panels with some of these people that I watch. Like, I mean.
Sometimes it is, for sure. I've been very lucky to be able to start to meet people and have that opportunity. Before I got really plugged into the Star Trek scene, I was at a convention, and this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, but I dedicated my PhD thesis to Captain Janeway, and she was at the convention, and I was like, I need to have her sign my thesis. And so I went, and that was the most sort of fangirl nervous I've ever got, was just, can you? And then, of course, she's like, oh my God, this is a PhD thesis, like dedicated to my character. So
like, I guess I'll sign it.
It was a really like beautiful, awkward moment. But then since then, I've started to get way more involved in the Star Trek scene, and been able to go to their official events. And so I was on the Star Trek cruise this last year with a lot of the actors from all of the series. That was probably the most surreal. But you know what? They were so nice, so welcoming, very much just come into the family. And what I like about these conventions is, you know, for the most part, I think if they're here, they really want to be here. They like doing this.
Yeah, they definitely love it and stuff. For you, because, you know, I'm huge into Discovery and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That show, in terms of the science of it and stuff, what's your opinion of it?
The spore drive threw me through a loop.
Okay, all right.
Most of my consulting is on artificial gravity and faster than light travel. So how you can go have warp drive.
Yeah.
And then they threw biology at me.
So you're just like,
like this. I know more about like fungus and tardigrades than I ever thought I would know. Thankfully, they kind of stepped a little bit away from that. So, you know, I'm a little bit more comfortable talking about it. But they've done some cool stuff this season. And, you know, I really like where they're going.
What is your opinion of Orville? Because that's another show that kind of surprised me. Like, we talked about it a lot. Like, that show surprised me with the amount of science fiction stuff that they put in there, and even some of the, you know, physics that they put in as well.
Yeah.
Like, what's your take on that? If you have seen any of the episodes.
Yeah, I have. I've not really gone into like study their way of doing warp drive or anything like that, but I do think what they've been able to do is, for me, they reach an audience that aren't necessarily Star Trek fans, and they tell some of the most important stories that Star Trek has told. Yeah. You know, so for those of us who are Trekkies, we watch it, we're like, oh, I know that episode.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
you catch the references already off the break.
But I think they do a really good job of still capturing that spirit of Star Trek and just kind of, you know, there's never been any sort of technobabble or science that's necessarily thrown out where they've taken it really seriously. I think if it is ridiculous science, they lean into it, and I like that. And that's the grace that you get of doing like a sci-fi comedy, right? That you can just be almost meta in the sense of like, we know we're being dumb about this.
So for you, what has been, like, I guess, the most important thing that you kind of stress when you do, like, when you're trying to speak to people and kind of, I guess, give them the idea of being an astrophysicist and such?
You know, I think it's really important that being a science communicator, there's kind of a two-way burden, right? That I use science fiction to teach science to people. And I really enjoy that. I think it's an anchor. I first kind of discovered the power of that when I was teaching at community college.
Yeah.
And, I'm talking about exoplanets, and half of the students are taking Astronomy 101 because they need a science credit.
Yeah.
And they thought they'd be looking at the stars all the day. And
Yeah.
they're, zoned out. And we're talking about exoplanets, and I mentioned that this Kepler telescope had discovered a planet that was like Luke Skywalker's home planet of Tatooine. The whole class was like, really? And then they started asking questions, and the hands started to raise, and it wasn't that, even though we were talking about Star Wars, we were talking about it critically, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, could there be a planet like that? What would need to happen? What is wrong with it? What is right with it that would allow that to be a thing? And that's when I found the power of just rooting science communication in science fiction. But then it goes the other way too. I think as science communicators, one thing I like to emphasize, especially when other scientists ask how they can get into it, it's so important to take every question seriously.
Yeah.
Because you get so many people who are just, especially at these events, they like science. They'll read the articles, but they don't know any scientists. And so they have an opportunity to ask a question, maybe something they're really confused about. And it's so important to not dismiss them, or make them feel dumb, because then no one wants to feel dumb, right?
No,
and so you don't want to dismiss them. You want to listen to them. And then if you do treat them poorly, they'll walk away and not ask a question of a scientist again and kind of be turned against science wholesale, which I think is kind of a little bit where we're at in our world right now.
Definitely.
So it's really important.
Cool. I guess lastly, the 2 panels that you have here, what are they about?
So I'm doing a lot of stuff.
Yes.
So I moderated a panel yesterday. That was the one with Mary Macdonald and Gates McFadden and Danielle Panabaker, and that was awesome. It was really good. It was about women in science fiction. We probably could have talked for 2 hours. I was on Mary Macdonald's.
Clips of it, and I was like, oh, they look like they can just go 2-3 hours.
Yeah, really easily. I was on Mary Macdonald's podcast, Lady Bam podcast, and it was like that. We talked for hours just about women and science, and it was great. And then I just came from the Star Wars versus Star Trek Science Tag Team Showdown, and it was really fun. It's friends of mine. We all know each other. We all love both fandoms, biology and physics, and we just like poke at each other and pull up best ones, and it's a really fun panel. And then I'm doing some solo ones. I did Voltron, the science of Voltron.
Oh, really?
I did astronomy. I'm going to do this evening Astronomy 101 in science fiction. So I take Astronomy 101 and fire hose it at people with science fiction references. Okay. And then I'm giving a talk on gravitational waves on Sunday. So
there you go. So,
busy schedule.
Yeah, so that in mind, is there any place people can like catch any of the material that you have?
Yeah, of course. So I have put some of these sort of science of sci-fi talks on YouTube. It's called Dr. Erin Explains the Universe. Okay. So they can find some of them there. And then I'm mostly on Twitter at Dr. Erin Mac, Dr. Erin Mac. And you can also find me on Instagram at that handle. So cool. Check it out.
Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you. Yeah, this was great.
All right, thanks.